Welcome to our fun little study group for PP 5361 Theory and Management of Public Service Organizations. These are the readings from the required text, Managing Human Behavior in Public and Nonprofit Organizations, Chapter 5.
It is good to be back. And today we are tackling a massive topic, one that sits at the very center of everything we discuss in public administration.
We really are. We are looking at Chapter 5, Decision-Making. And I have to be honest with you, and I suspect I'm speaking for the listener here too, when you see a title like Decision-Making in a textbook, your eyes kind of glaze over.
Oh, absolutely.
You expect a lot of dry flow charts, maybe some arrows pointing to boxes, and, a lot of abstract theory about choosing.
That is a very common reaction. It sounds like administrative housekeeping. It sounds like something that just happens in the background while the real work is getting done.
Exactly. But as I was reading this chapter, I had a bit of a wake-up call. I realized this isn't dry at all. This is actually high-stakes drama.
It really is.
We're talking about choices where if you get it wrong in the public sector, it's not just about losing a bit of profit or missing a quarterly target. We're talking about ruining lives, toppling nations, or causing massive infrastructure failures.
The stakes are incredibly high. In the business world, a bad decision costs money. In the military or public service, a bad decision can cost lives. And what makes this chapter so essential is that it peels back the curtain on how those calls are made.
Right.
It turns out it's rarely a single brilliant person sitting in a room being purely logical. It is much, much messier than that.
Right, and the text opens with this perfect example of that chaos, the I-95 collapse.
Yes, the situation in the Northeast Corridor. A classic case study in everything we're about to discuss.
So for anyone who hasn't driven through Philly or Wilmington, this is a major artery. The text lays out this scenario where a section of Interstate 95 is undermined, it's physically crumbling.
A huge problem.
And the decision facing the engineers and administrators is, do we shut down a 10-mile stretch of one of the busiest highways in the country for months to fix it properly?
And on the surface, that looks like a singular, a binary decision. Yes, shut it down for safety. It seems obvious.
Of course, safety first.
But what this chapter highlights is the concept of the cascading consequence.
It's the domino effect from hell, basically.
Precisely. You make that one decision, and suddenly you trigger a massive web of other problems you might not have even thought about. You shut the road, so you have to reroute traffic.
Okay.
That rerouted traffic destroys the quiet residential neighborhoods nearby. Because now 18-wheelers are driving past front porches day and night.
So then the administration thinks, okay, this is a disaster, let's get people on trains. That's the next logical step.
Right. You pivot to alternative transport, you work with Amtrak, you increase the schedule, but then where do all those new train commuters put their cars? Suddenly, you have a parking shortage at the station. Then you realize the parking lot you need was just converted to long-term parking only by a completely different department last week.
Wow. That is the key takeaway for me right off the bat. Public decisions are never isolated islands.
No.
There are these interconnected webs where you pull one string and the whole knot tightens somewhere else.
That is exactly it. And that brings us to the core mission of this deep dive. We need to understand the anatomy of these decisions so we don't get caught in that web. We're going to look at why decisions fail. And spoiler alert, they fail a lot. And we're going to look at the different lenses or models we use to understand them.
So let's unpack the basics first. Section 1, the anatomy of a decision. The text gives a definition, but it's a bit dense. How do we break it down?
Okay, so the text defines it as identifying an issue, carrying out a process to make a choice, and producing outcomes with consequences. But I think the history of the term is actually more interesting than the dictionary definition.
This surprised me. I mean, we always think of decision-making as corporate speak. Guys in suits in a boardroom making decisions.
True, but it actually came from public administration first. Chester Barnard, a business executive, actually imported the term decision-making into the business world from the public sector, not the other way around.
No way.
Yeah. Before that, business was just doing. The phrase decision-making implies a deliberation, a pause before the action. It implies that there is a process involved.
And not all pauses are created equal. The text distinguishes between programmed and non-programmed decisions.
This is the critical difference between your day-to-day autopilot and the crisis room.
So programmed decisions are the routine ones, the easy stuff.
Correct. These are repetitive. You have a rule book. If you are in lower management, say running a DMV counter, most of what you do is programmed. If Form A is missing signature B, reject the application.
You don't need to hold a summit to figure that out.
Exactly. The decision has effectively already been made for you by the policy.
But then you have the non-programmed ones, the big scary ones.
These are infrequent, poorly structured, and you usually find them at the top of the organizational ladder. There is no manual for the highway just collapsed, what now? Or there is a global pandemic, do we lock down the economy?
Right.
These require difficult problem solving and judgment.
The text mentions the risk factor here as a major differentiator.
Yes. The higher up the ladder you go, the less programming there is. The uncertainty acts as a multiplier. You are dealing with vague information, massive consequences.
And you have to be comfortable with the fact that you might be wrong.
You have to be.
And there is one other factor that makes public decision-making a nightmare compared to private business: the fishbowl.
Michael Blumenthal's concept. This is a vital distinction. In a private company, you can argue behind closed doors. You can throw out terrible ideas, fight about them, come to a conclusion, and then announce the final plan.
But in the public sector, you have sunshine laws.
Which means everyone is watching the sausage get made. The media, stakeholders, angry citizens.
Everyone's got an opinion.
And even your hypothetical plans, contingency scenarios you never intend to use, can be pulled via a Freedom of Information Act request and splashed on the front page as a secret plan.
That has to lead to paralysis. I mean, if I know my brainstorming notes might be on the evening news, I'm going to be terrified to write anything down.
It definitely changes the dynamic. It forces public managers to manage the optics of the decision just as much as the decision itself. You aren't just solving a problem. You are performing the act of solving a problem for an audience that is ready to criticize you.
Which leads us nicely into Section 2, Why We Fail. Because despite all this scrutiny, or maybe because of it, we are really, really bad at this.
We are. The text cites Paul Nutt's research, which is, frankly, terrifying. He found that half of all decisions fail.
50%. That is a coin toss. If a surgeon had a 50% failure rate, they'd be in jail.
It is staggering. And he defines failure as decisions that are never implemented or are implemented and then abandoned because they just didn't work.
And sometimes they don't just fail quietly, they crash and burn. The text calls these decision debacles.
These are the ones that hit the history books. The British Millennium Dome is a classic example. Hundreds of millions of pounds spent on a futuristic exhibit that nobody wanted to visit.
I remember that.
It was a massive solution in search of a problem.
Or Euro Disney. That example always sticks with me. Disney thought they could just copy-paste the American theme park model into France without considering the cultural differences.
Exactly. They didn't count for the fact that the French might not want to eat a burger and fries at the exact same time Americans do, or that they view Americana differently.
So they built a park for an audience that didn't exist.
They failed to adapt to the local context. It was a huge, expensive failure.
Nutt identifies 3 elements that usually lead to these debacles.
Right. First, faulty decision practices. Just doing the process wrong. Second, premature commitments, deciding on the solution before you even understand the problem.
I feel like we see that one all the time. We need an app. Okay, but for what? I don't know, but we committed to the app.
Exactly. That's a premature commitment. And third, misallocation of resources. Spending all your money analyzing the wrong thing or justifying the wrong problem.
The text also talks about the experience blind spot. I loved the analogy here. It's basically the idea that if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
It is a huge danger for experienced managers. You have been successful in the past using strategy A. Now you face a new problem. It looks kind of like the old problem, so you just grab strategy A again without questioning if it fits.
You're blinded by your own experience.
Exactly. You were trying to hammer in a screw because hammering worked last time.
And even if you avoid that, you run into bottlenecks. Rogers and Blanco identified 4 of them. Can we run through those? Because I feel like anyone working in a large office is going to recognize these immediately.
Oh, absolutely. These are the structural reasons why things get stuck. The first is global versus local. Who decides? Does the HQ in Washington decide, or the branch office in Seattle?
Then center versus business unit. The example used was the post office.
Right. Should the decision to leave a package on a porch be made by the central postmaster general via a blanket policy, or the delivery person standing on the sidewalk who knows the neighborhood?
That seems obvious when you put it that way.
You'd think so. Then you have function versus cross-functional.
The silo problem.
That's it. Is patient care just the heart surgeon's decision? Or do we need the nurses, the rehab specialists, and the dietitians involved? If you only let one function decide, you miss the full picture.
And the last one, inside versus outside partners. This is huge for nonprofits, isn't it?
It is. If a school district hires a nonprofit to provide mental health materials and the parents hate the materials, who is accountable? The school, the nonprofit, the state that mandated it. When you outsource, you often outsource the work but muddy the accountability. It creates a bottleneck where no one knows who has the final say.
So we have the anatomy of the decision, and we have all the ways it can go wrong. Now let's talk about how we actually look at these decisions. Section 3 covers the models of decision-making, and this centers heavily on Graham Allison.
Graham Allison is a titan in this field.
Yeah.
He wrote The Essence of Decision, where he analyzed the Cuban Missile Crisis. He basically said, if you look at this crisis through different lenses, you see completely different things.
So let's put on these lenses. Lens number 1, the rational model.
It's the classic view, the one we think of first. It assumes there's a single brain making the choice. We call this economic man.
Economic man is the guy I wish I was. He sounds very put together.
We all do. Economic man has all the information. He knows every possible alternative. He calculates the costs and benefits perfectly and chooses the one that maximizes value. He is a supercomputer.
But then Herbert Simon comes along and bursts that bubble.
Herbert Simon introduces a reality check. He says, look, humans have cognitive limits. We can't process everything. We don't have time to evaluate every single car on the market before buying one. Our brains just aren't built for that.
So we don't maximize. What's the word? Satisfice.
Satisfice. It's a mashup of satisfy and suffice. We look for a solution that is good enough.
Okay.
We stop searching as soon as we find an option that meets our minimum criteria. We aren't economic man. We are administrative man.
That makes me feel better about my life choices. I'm not lazy. I'm just engaging in bounded rationality.
It is the only way to function. If you try to be fully rational, you'd never make a decision because you'd never finish gathering data. You'd be paralyzed by analysis.
Okay, so that's lens 1. Lens 2 is the organizational process model.
This lens zooms out. It says government isn't one brain. It's a loose alliance of giant organizations. And organizations don't think, they follow routines.
Standard operating procedures, SOPs, the rule book.
Exactly. You don't make a fresh decision every time. You follow the manual. This leads to incrementalism, a concept by Charles Lindblom. He says we don't make giant leaps. We muddle through. We make small tweaks to the status quo.
The text had a jarring example here about C-sections in hospitals.
Yes. Studies show that C-section rates often tracked with organizational standards like procedures and scheduling convenience, rather than the best medical practice for that specific individual patient.
That's chilling.
It is. That is the dark side of the organizational process model. The routine overrides the rational need. The machine keeps running the way it was designed to run, regardless of the specific outcome.
That is terrifying. Okay, lens 3, the governmental politics model.
This is the lens where you see the messy reality. Decisions aren't made by a single rational actor, and they aren't just robotic procedures. They are the result of a power struggle.
It's a brawl.
It's bargaining. It's pulling and hauling. You have the State Department wanting one thing, the Pentagon wanting another, and the White House staff wanting a third.
And they all have their own agendas.
Absolutely. The final decision isn't the best one. It's the collage that comes out of that fight. It's the result of a compromise that maybe nobody's fully happy with, but it's what they could agree on to move forward.
So those are the 3 main lenses. But then the text throws in a 4th model, and I have to say, the name is fantastic, the garbage can model.
Yes, Cohen, March, and Olson. It sounds like a joke, but it's a brilliant description of organized anarchy.
Explain this to me. How is a decision a garbage can?
Okay, imagine a university or a loose nonprofit. The model says you have streams flowing through the organization. You have a stream of problems, you have a stream of solutions, and you have a stream of participants, people looking for something to do.
Wait, so the solutions exist before the problem?
In this model, yes. That's the key insight. You have people walking around with a solution, say a new software they learned to use or a PhD program they want to teach, and they're looking for a problem they can attach it to.
That is painfully accurate. I just bought a label maker. Now I need to find things to label.
Exactly. The garbage can is the choice opportunity, the meeting, the committee, where everyone dumps their problems and their pet solutions. And what comes out is often random. Sometimes a decision is made just to clear the can.
The text mentions decision by flight.
Right. That's where you don't actually solve the problem. The problem just gets attached to a different garbage can, a different committee, and leaves the room. So you declare victory because the can is empty.
But the problem is just someone else's mess now.
Precisely.
I feel like I've sat in that meeting. Let's form a subcommittee.
That is classic decision by flight. It's avoidance masquerading as action.
So we have these models, but we also have to talk about the human element, the ethical minefield. Section 4 covers this, and it turns out our brains are sort of wired to ignore bad behavior.
This is where psychology meets management. Bazerman and Tensbrussel identify these ethical blind spots. And the most insidious one, I think, is motivated blindness.
Which is what?
It's when it is in your best interest to stay ignorant. If you are making money off a conflict of interest, your brain will actually prevent you from seeing it as unethical.
So you're not necessarily lying.
No, you're not. You are effectively blinding yourself. You genuinely believe you're being fair because the incentive to believe that is so strong.
And then there's indirect blindness.
That is delegation. I don't want to know how you get the numbers up. Just get them up. You delegate the dirty work so you can feel clean. You create a buffer between your conscience and the unethical act.
The text also brings up ill-conceived goals. The housing bubble example is a stark reminder here.
Right. The Clinton administration and many others pushed for higher home ownership rates. A noble goal on its face.
Sure.
But that pressure led lenders to give mortgages to people who couldn't afford them. The goal was ownership, but the outcome was a financial collapse. They didn't intend to crash the economy, but the goal was ill-conceived because it didn't account for the systemic side effects.
We also have groupthink, Jonas's concept.
The desire for unanimity overrides the motivation to appraise alternatives. It's when keeping the peace becomes more important than being right.
The example in the text is so relatable. You are in a classroom. It's 5 minutes before the bell. You have a question, but you see everyone else packing up their bags.
So you stay silent. You conform. In a classroom, that means you stay confused. In a government cabinet meeting, that means you invade a country based on bad intelligence. Because nobody wanted to be the one to say, wait a minute, are we sure about this?
And the countermeasure to this is diversity.
Friedrich Mosher's argument. Representativeness is crucial. If everyone in the room looks the same, thinks the same, and comes from the same background, you're going to have massive blind spots.
They all reinforce each other's biases.
Exactly. Diverse groups check the insidious effects of groupthink and provide different perspectives. They're harder to manage for sure, but they produce better decisions.
But then you have the challenge of cultural differences in decision-making styles.
Yes. For example, the U.S. focus is often on rationality and, linear progress. Let's solve the problem. Other cultures might focus on accepting the situation or cyclical time. If you don't understand those differences, you get conflict and misunderstanding.
Okay, so we know the traps. Let's get practical. Section 5 is tools and techniques. How do we actually make better decisions?
First, you have to generate alternatives. You can't choose the best option if you haven't listed the options. The text uses the horse grooming case from Rochester, NY.
I love this little detective story. Andrea Alvarez, the management analyst, she's tasked with figuring out how to groom the new police horses.
And she doesn't know anything about horses.
Right. So she does the work, she goes to stables, she interviews people, and she doesn't just come up with one idea.
She breaks it down into 4 distinct options. 1, hire a full-time city employee, which is expensive but reliable. 2, hire a part-time employee, cheaper, but you might have availability issues. 3, contract it out hourly. And 4, use the stable hands who are already at the rented stable.
It sounds simple, but how often do we just jump to the first idea, just hire someone? She actually mapped out the cost and benefit of each. That's the key.
Exactly. It's about gap analysis. What is versus what should be, and listing every possible bridge between the two.
Another tool mentioned is the RAPID framework. We talked about bottlenecks earlier. This seems to be the cure.
RAPID is an acronym for roles. Recommend, agree, perform, input, and decide. The most important distinction here is between input and recommend.
How so?
People often think if they give input, they have a vote. RAPID clarifies that input provides information, but the recommender isn't bound by it. And the decider has the final say. It clarifies who holds the pen and stops meetings from going in circles.
Okay, then there are brainstorming rules. Pretty straightforward.
Yeah, the basics. Quantity over quality, at least at first. No judgment or criticism allowed during the generation phase. And piggybacking on ideas is encouraged. You have to separate the generation of ideas from the evaluation of ideas.
And the nominal group technique. This is for making sure everyone gets a voice.
It's a way to equalize input. Everyone writes ideas down silently first. Then you go around the room, round robin style, and present them without debate. Then you vote. It prevents the loudest person from dominating the conversation.
I like that. Finally, evidence-based management and logic models.
This is about using data, things like CompStat in policing or Citistat. Logic models help you work backward from your end outcomes, like, say, healthy children, to intermediate outcomes like high immunization rates, all the way back to the activities you need to do, like running health centers.
It forces you to prove the connection between what you do and what you want to achieve.
Exactly. It's about making your theory of change explicit.
Okay, section 6, discretion and the real world. Because sometimes the rule book just fails.
This is administrative discretion, a huge concept.
And it brings us to Michael Lipsky's street-level bureaucrats.
Police, teachers, social workers. These are the people who actually make policy choices by how they interact with citizens. The law in the books is one thing. The law on the street is what these people decided is in the moment.
And the Katrina example from the text is just a stunning illustration of this.
It really is. You had this massive clash between the rules and the reality on the ground.
The governors in Tennessee and Alabama used discretion to suspend laws. They allowed pharmacists to help evacuees without the standard checks. They moved school buses across jurisdictions to get people out.
Things that were technically illegal.
Right, but necessary. And that's Dillman's contention, isn't it?
Yes. That discretion is absolutely necessary in emergencies for efficiency and effectiveness. If you follow the rules in a crisis, sometimes you are choosing to let people die. That's the hard truth of it.
So performance management tools like benchmarking and business process reengineering are about trying to make the rules better, to cut the red tape before the crisis hits.
Exactly. You analyze the workflows to make them smarter, so maybe you need less discretion next time.
Okay, so let's wrap this all up. As an outro, the text gives us a nice summary of the building blocks for a good decision.
All right, it's a good checklist. First, smoke out the issue. Don't just solve the surface problem. Ask why. Multiple times to get to the root.
Then state the purpose. What are we actually trying to do here?
Set criteria. What do we want to achieve? What do we have to preserve? And what must we avoid?
Establish priorities. You can't do everything.
Search for solutions. That's your brainstorming phase.
Test alternatives against your criteria.
And finally, troubleshoot. Ask what could go wrong with our brilliant plan.
As a final reflection, the text brings up the smart cities case study concept. This guy, Max Herbert, is trying to introduce autonomous vehicles to a city, but his staff is super tradition-bound. It's a perfect storm of everything we've talked about.
It is. He's facing SOPs, groupthink, maybe even the experienced blind spot from his own team.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you, the listener. This is based on the thinking and actions section of the text.
Think about the last 3 meaningful decisions you made. Did they really need to be made, or had they already been made for you by circumstance? And if you had used a garbage can model, would you have just waited for the problem to fly away?
See you at the next study session.